Hello and welcome to the Savvy Gadgets channel with me, Ian, and this behemoth here is my gaming rig, or at least it was up until a few Fridays ago when it decided that it wasn't ever going to work again. Now, I have tried to tinker with this and make it work and I just can't. It comes up with error codes when I'm booting it, and it cycles up and it cycles down a couple of times. And the error codes it gives me are error code 32, and I do actually have the manual. And error code 32 says CPU PEI initialization. And then it cycles down, cycles back up. It did give me an error code 15 when I had the SATA drives plugged in, but now without those plugged in, it comes up with DB, which says flash update is failed. Well, I've tried all sorts of different tinkering methods, clearing the CMOS, using one stick of RAM rather than both of them, and interestingly enough, one stick of RAM in slot 1 of the RAM slots gives the cycle of the 32 error code and DB error code, but the other one, the moment you turn it on, it just turns straight off again. So not entirely sure whether that means overall that my motherboard is broken and that I have a bad memory stick as well, or whether the CPU just isn't playing ball. So I'm at a bit of an impasse. So in order to fix this situation, I thought, okay, so maybe I could just try getting a replacement motherboard. Well, yes, I still have the box. There's the motherboard. It's a Gigabyte Z77X, so it's a Z77 chipset. The socket on it is an LGA 1155, and this is the motherboard that has been serving me well since August 2012. Yes, my build is almost 8 years old this year, so it's 2020. So the only things I've done to it is to upgrade the drives in it, so it's now got SATA drives and it now has a much bigger graphics card, which currently isn't in it because as part of the tinkering I took that out. So the only thing in there is the CPU and the RAM. So I thought I'll get a replacement motherboard for this. Now this motherboard originally cost me back then £165, and I brought all of my parts from my overclockers. Now the problem with this is because it's such an old motherboard is they don't make these anymore, and they don't make them with this chipset, so that makes things a little bit more awkward. So the only place that you can find them is second hand or manufacturer refurbished on other sites. Now I did find one that says that it's been pulled out of a working machine and has been tested as working, and that costs £144. So what that actually means is if I spend £144 to get exactly the same motherboard, I'm exactly where I am. I might get a working computer, the memory might be fine, the CPU might be fine, and I plug it all together and I get back the computer that I had before, but it's still an 8-year-old machine, and I've spent money and I'm not sort of moving forward in terms of performance or new parts. There's also the possibility that the memory will need to be replaced, and looking at prices on the internet from eBay and shops, you can still buy the memory. It's going to cost me somewhere around the £85 mark, so I was now possibly looking at about £250 to get that all delivered and brought. So, but once again, I'm not moving forward in terms of price. So I thought, okay, the only place I can get the motherboard replacement from, if it's not from a shop, is on eBay, and it's even more expensive on eBay, which was a bit of a surprise for me, because it was empowerlaptops.com that had the cheapest motherboard replacement for this, and at least I suppose I'll get some kind of warranty from that. So I thought, okay, well, perhaps the next best thing is, if I'm going to spend that money, perhaps I should buy just a sort of like a workstation and just bung my parts in that. Now that seemed like a good idea, and then I started looking into it, and it turns out that that's probably not going to be as effective as I thought it was, because basically the cheapest I could find was around the £156 mark, and the problem with that is the CPU was an older model. It wasn't as fast. It had 16 gigabytes of memory, which my rig currently has, or had. But, you know, it's very much a case of, you know, I'm spending money again, but now I'm going backwards. Now, I could buy that machine, open it up, put my SSDs in it, and put in my graphics card, but then that largely depends on whether the motherboard has the right sort of PCI Express slot on it. It also depends on whether the power supply actually has enough oomph, enough watts to actually power the graphics card, and has the right 6 and 8 pin connectors on it. So if it doesn't, then it looks like I'm going to have to buy a power supply on top of that, which brings me back up to around £250. But then again, I'm moving backwards in terms of performance rather than forwards. So not a great idea. So I've bit the bullet. So I thought I've got to basically move forward, upgrade, buy new parts, which is what I've done. So I took a look around, and the cheapest I could find was from Scan. And I've used Scan in the past. I think that's where my graphics card came from. It came from Scan. And this is pretty an unusual situation for me, because normally I'm used to buying a motherboard, buying the RAM, buying the cooler and the motherboard, and having to build it myself. Now, the bundles that were on Scan come pre-built. They put the CPU in, they put the cooler on for you, and they put the RAM in on the motherboard. So it's all pre-built. And the nice thing is today I received a picture of all of that assembled, and they test it to make sure it's working before they send it out. Now, I thought this was a great idea. Saves me having to do a lot of fiddly stuff, because then I just get the whole thing assembled and I just take all of that out and then just slot it in. I don't need the plate, because the motherboard that it comes with actually has a block plate on the back of it, and you'll see that in the next video. So hopefully that's going to be delivered tomorrow. And the bundle I went for was a Ryzen 7. Now, this is the first AMD processor that I've ever owned. Up until now, the only other processor that I've had that isn't Intel was a Citrix. Yep, Citrix. If you've heard of those, you're old like me. So, as you can see, this is quite a dirty old PC. It's 8 years old. And so is the power supply. So, not only have I brought a CPU, motherboard, memory, I've also brought a new power supply, because it's entirely possible that the power supply isn't providing enough power to the motherboard and the parts anymore, and that's what the problem is. It could be that the motherboard has finally, given up the ghost. So I'm going to have all of that out, and that will give me an opportunity to clean the inside of the case. The hard drives are coming out, motherboard and all the rest of it is coming out, so it's just going to be a clean case, and I'm going to clean it down and give it a thorough de-dusting. Now, further to that, I do have one other problem. Like I say, I've owned this for a long time, and the fans on the front seem to be working absolutely fine still. And it's just one big fan, and that's sucking air in. However, this one here on the back, on the exhaust, and this one up here in the top, which is an exhaust, they don't seem to have worked or moved in years. Now, it doesn't seem to have been a problem. The processor isn't overheating, the graphics card hasn't overheated, so even though they're plugged in and they did work, they may not actually be needed. So they might work when I plug them in, or they might not. So they might need replacing. I might need them, I might not. Depends on how the temperatures go when I build the new rig. So that's where we are at the moment. I've got to strip all of that out and clean it all up, ready for some new bits to go in it tomorrow. And that's what my job is today. The other thing that I have done is I've already had the mechanical drive out of here, and it's currently in this, and that works absolutely fine. And I pulled data off of my C drive, so I know my C drive's working okay. Now, it was working okay before, but originally when the problem started, it was complaining about the boot volume. Now, after that, I did a PC refresh, and all seemed hunky-dory. rebooted into Windows after reinstalling it, installed a few bits and pieces, and then after a reboot I started getting the error codes. So tomorrow I get to do a build. So until then, thanks for watching. Until that video, see you then. Bye bye.